Alright, bro. I love you, man. I'm gonna holler at you. Well, peace. Yeah, man. So yeah, we were just talking about like a bunch of different stuff, honestly. You know what I'm saying? But we were talking about in a lot of ways how okay, I can't remember. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. But what I gathered from everything, and I guess what I want to say in conclusion is that you know the things that people have a tendency to do, and the way that oftentimes churches go about them, you know what I'm saying, are contradictory to um, getting through to the way people react to stuff. Now, I'm not saying that churches have to coddle to people's behavior, um, but what I am saying is that if you're talking about people that come to church, you know what I'm saying, and they earnestly, I don't know how I have it. Talking about people that come to church and they earnestly are trying to figure out a way to get to God, you know, and like they're a sinner, as you know, everybody is, you know, and it's not like, oh, everybody's a sinner, so relax a little bit, you know. The point is that people are struggling with stuff. Like, it's hard for a person to come out and just be like, hey, okay, the real reason that I'm doing this is because I struggle with the fact that I have a bad relationship with my peoples because X, Y, and Z happen, you know. Um, People are going to come to that revelation on their own that they need to buck up and do what the heck they're supposed to do. Otherwise, you know, they won't reach salvation. They won't acquire salvation. You know what I mean? You know, because like you can't play with God's grace. You know, and that's a personal thing for everybody. So the interesting thing is that as a church leader, as a preacher, your job is to, I would say, preach the gospel to every creature. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're out here supposed to be doing, preaching the gospel to every creature. So first, we got to understand the gospel. Number one, you got to read it and know what's going on. You know what I'm saying? And read it in the context like how the apostles looked at it. They understood the Old Testament like the back of their hand, and the books that are referenced all throughout the Bible by other folks. Like, yes, so it is written in such book. Probably read that book. You know what I'm saying? Like if people's talking, and then also like so I would say definitely like look into the history, but like as far as like the separation in doctrines of the churches and all that kind of stuff, I would say that's kind of like ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like Lutherans and Baptists and Seventh Day Adventists and all that kind of stuff. Like I forget where, but in the New Testament it talks about how everybody's supposed to have the same spirit. You know, we're all supposed to worship under the same spirit. You know, and have the same spirit, and that spirit comes from the Word, and the Word is alive. You know what I'm saying? And people don't, um, become Christians and they're just like, or start practicing the ways of holiness rather, and just like, yeah, I'm just gonna start going to church. Like it's something that gets revealed to people, you know. And the thing is, and here's the thing: there's a difference, and this is what you really gotta understand is that you got a lot of people that be like, yeah, you know what I'm saying, I was on drugs and I came to God and all this kind of stuff. And they just kind of sit there, you know what I'm saying? Like they understand that the lifestyle that they had was wrong, you know what I'm saying, or bad, or, you know what I'm saying, not serving God more importantly, you know what I'm saying? So now they turn and they want to serve God. So the first thing that they do is they go to church because that's where you find God at, right? Wrong. Where you find God at is in the Word. And a lot of people fall back on this concept like, well, I'm not a good reader, or I'm not going to sit there and study. Like I know I'm not even good with books like that. Like so, I'm just gonna let the preacher talk, and then I'll go to heaven. But it doesn't work that way. You know what I'm saying? The Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." You know what I'm saying? So you got to go out and acquire the Word for yourself and read it for yourself and really kind of understand it for yourself and really And then once you do that, then you'll start to understand where the disparities come from. Why there's churches like, yeah, we're Baptist, or yeah, we're Lutheran, or yeah, we're Seventh-day Adventist, or whatever, right? Like you'll start to understand why you got people that's out there and they're like, yeah, you know, this is how we're gonna practice it. Because when you read it, you know, there's especially, you know, there's easy ways to kind of get hung up on it, you know, especially if you don't read it in its entirety, you know what I'm saying? Like if you just kind of like page through it or cherry pick through it, like you can make up, and that's pretty much like you go to church and they're like, yeah, today what we're talking about is this, and then they got a bunch of different whatchamacallits, and it kind of, you know, is supposed to bring home the point. But the problem often is that when you read these verses, you got to remember that you're reading them. You got to read verses in context of certain things. You know what I'm saying? So like, and like for instance, like if you ask people that, like, if people be like, yeah, I read the Bible before. Like, okay, so what's the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament? You know, real simple question, right? If you don't know the answer to that, you've never read the Bible. I know that you might have sat there and read the Bible, but you've never read it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if somebody asked me about a question about a book that I've read, you know what I'm saying? I should be like, especially if I, you know, read it recently or I read it and I'm like, oh yeah, I read that book. I remember that book, yeah. Or if we're having a debate or a conversation and people, and they're like, oh yeah, I love that book. This is the book that I live by. And I'm like, nah, I read it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not really interested in the book because, like, I already read it and it just didn't appeal to me. And you ask a question like, what didn't appeal to you about it specifically? And they're like, well, everything. You didn't read the fucking book. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't try to act like you read it. You know, you didn't. It's alright. Okay. But there is a reason why you're not reading it. You know what I'm saying? Let's be honest. Like, the reason why you don't read the book, and the reason why is because when you have to turn that mirror in on yourself and you realize, like, oh man, like there's lots of stuff about my life that's screwed up, and stuff that I'm doing and pretty much everything that I'm doing is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Because it lays out real simple basic principles on life and how you're supposed to live, and then once you realize that you didn't do all that stuff, and then you see the repercussions of it, and then you also see that these repercussions are indeed oftentimes the punishments, you know what I'm saying, that God lays out before you. Like, you're supposed to do these things for a reason, and then you're supposed to train the next generation to do these things for a reason. Because if you don't, what happens is you got a lot of chaos, havoc, turmoil. You know what I'm saying? As we're seeing now, like we're like, oh yeah, every generation's getting worse, and people think that the answer is like, well, yeah, it's just we're gonna do this, and we're gonna have entitlements and rights, and we're gonna switch genders around and identities and all this other stupid shit, and we're gonna you know, have rights for stuff that doesn't, like gay marriage and all this other shit. Like, look, the thing is, people for a very long time have been living like the way that they've been living for a reason. Like, you don't just up and start changing stuff, you know what I'm saying, and then call it, you know, revolution. Matter of fact, what you should do is you should look at what happens at the end of any like big empire. Like, the same thing that happens is the same thing that's happening now. You know what I'm saying? Like, they make like, it's a lot of weird connections and stuff. Like, I seen like a few videos on it and stuff like that of people that supposedly did the research, and they sounded like they knew what they were talking about. Hey, if it's on the internet, it must be real, right? Yes. But so, you know, but the point is that, you know, when you start to look at the way society's going now, you kind of you can see, like, it's not by accident, all this stuff. Every time there's like a social revolution, you know, 10, 20 years down the line, 10 years down the line, it gets worse. You know, 10 years later, it's more screwed up. Like, look at the way people were using drugs, and the type of drugs that people were using, and the drug use from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s. You know what I'm saying? Look at it. You see that? You know what I'm saying? What was that? like weed, hallucinogenics, motherfucking what was in the 70s. Everything, pretty much every damn thing was in the 70s. I forgot which big thing hit in the 70s. But then in the 80s, it was like cocaine every fucking where. And then the 90s or late 80s to 90s or whatever, it was like crack. Now you got all these pill epidemics and shit. Now they're just going, straight pharmaceutical. Everybody's fucking addicted. You know what I'm saying? All these kids are born messed up. You know what I'm saying? My son was born like really premature. Everybody's like really, really obese. And then like they're attacking like the whole like just men in general. You know what I'm saying? And then you got like racism running rampant, and now like it's getting ridiculous on both sides. Like racism, like is like race. You know what I'm saying? Which we all know what like race is, like the human race, for instance. And then you got race, and then ism is like the belief of, like Catholicism. It's like the belief in the Catholic religion or whatever, or atheism. Belief in like what, self, I guess. I don't know. But so anyways, or no belief in God. I don't know. Whatever atheist is, moron. But anyways, a bit tea though. It's nice. It's real nice. Damn, what the fuck was I talking about? And oh yeah, racism. Yeah, racism is ridiculous though, man. And so the problem with racism is that you believe, is basically simply the belief that there's a Chinese race or a black race or a white race. That's my definition of racism as far as I'm concerned. Like when you look at the words, like it's a belief in these races. Now, a lot of people will be like, look, I believe in the human race. And you're like, cop out. But, genetically speaking, we don't really do this with other animals. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people say that humans are animals. And whereas, we certainly have bodies and there's lots of stuff that we, have in common with animals, we are not animals. We are in fact different. But I would say on a genetic level, we do share a lot of the rules that animals have to follow. You know what I'm saying? And that's prevalent in the sense that we all live on the same planet. You know what I mean? So, that being said, when we as humans look at animals, we're not like if a pack of dogs was running down the street, and notice the verbiage, right? If a pack of dogs is running down the street, we wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, look, there's 4 cocker spaniels and 2. We wouldn't break it down like that. We would see them as dogs. You know what I'm saying? Or the same way that like if a horde of people was running, we would see it as, there's a big ass group outside. You know what I'm saying? Now, if that group was predominantly white or predominantly black, and then we would probably say, yeah, there's a big group of black people outside. And it's really only because, we just use shit to explain stuff, like if there was a bunch of women, like there was a crazy ass group of naked women outside, everybody'd be like, what the fuck, So, the point is that, just on natural, automated, built-in social terms, like we don't differentiate between, species when we look at other animal groups or even large groups of people. You know what I'm saying? Unless they all share a unique trait. The same way that if um, it was a big ass group of poodles. You know what I'm saying? Like then you would say, yo, there's a big ass group of poodles outside. Then you'd make that differentiation. But you're not doing it based on the fact that, you know, you look at uh, poodles as not dogs. You see what I'm saying? Poodles are dogs. You know what I'm saying? Same way that black people and white people are both humans. Just real simple. There's a real interesting example. If you ever used to watch like X-Men, or if you ever follow X-Men, like in like the early '90s X-Men show, you all know what I'm talking about. That one. The humans like were they had built they had built Sentinels, which were big ass robots that basically could um, scout out people with mutated DNA, the mutants, and basically capture them. And they had all these awesome powers. They were big, huge ass robots. They could fight, defend against mutants. They were made of metal at first, but then they ran into a mutant named Magneto who could control metal, so they made them out of plastic after that. But hardened plastic, whatever, you get the point, right? But the point is that when they got the mutants and captured them, the robots, the people that had built the robots, sent them out. They were just regular humans, and they were like, politicians and a mad scientist or whatever. So when the humans and the robots were all together and they were about to complete their master plan, the robots basically had switched their idea and basically was just going to take over the world. And the humans was like, no, you can't do that. You're supposed to capture mutants.
You were designed to protect humans from mutants.
You fool.
That is not logical.
Mutants are
human.
Or no, he said you're not supposed to harm humans. He said, you fool, mutants are humans. And so the point of the big reveal, I screwed it up. Damn it. And the point is that just like the robot said, if or any type of like world-ending event, you know what I'm saying? All that racism shit goes out the window. You know what I'm saying? Like people don't stick to their guns in situations like that. Now, reversely, and I'm not saying, and here's another very interesting and very true thing. Now, reversely, I'm not saying that, in a lot of situations, people don't go with their own race, because you see that a lot in prison. But then it begs the question as to whether or not it's a learned behavior or something that's been created. You know what I'm saying? Because that could just be the norm in American prisons. You know what I'm saying? We probably have to survey other prisons all around the world. But I would imagine it would probably get the same result. And the only reason why it's something that's not that's human nature. Bam. The only reason why it's not one of those definite moments is only because as babies, you know what I'm saying, before, or so at our preset, automated, fresh from the factory, so to speak, settings, like you don't see that behavior, So it begs the question as to whether it's, social, or nurture versus nature and all that good stuff. But, who knows.